I want to say that again. It's more scientific to believe that life has come from a source of life than to believe that it has come spontaneously from self-existent matter. Okay? So just at the outset here, I want you to understand my belief in Christianity and my belief in the existence of God is not something that is over and against my reason. It's absolutely essential to understand that. When I became a Christian, if I would have had to put my mind on a shelf, I would have never become a Christian. No way. If your Christianity is the kind of Christianity, or your religion is the kind of religion that necessitates you not thinking, then I highly urge you to repudiate whatever version of theism that you have chosen to accept and move away from that. One of the reasons that I personally am a Christian, one of the reasons that I am a theist, is because I believe it is what is in fact the most credible and the most intellectually compelling and stimulating. So right here at the outset, you can take the very non-scientific view that life generated spontaneously and even miraculously, if you will, from non-life, and thus you have a patently naturalistic universe, what is called methodological naturalism, or you can take the view that in the beginning there was a life source, that himself or herself or itself, whatever it is, we've not defined that yet, that this being was the source of all life, and from that single primary act of supernatural creation, all life proceeds from that point. Just on this point alone, theism is more scientifically credible than atheism. Now somebody protests and says, well, you know, where does your God come from? If your God is alive, who created your God? Well, that's an excellent question, but that's a theological question, not a scientific one. If God exists, if that statement is true, it is more scientifically credible to believe that He can create life than to believe that it's spontaneously generated from pre-existent matter. Does that sort of make sense there, yes or no? Now that in and of itself does not demonstrate that God exists. Hardly. But it surely does open the door to theism. It surely does open the door. Now, let's move to the second case here, and I think you'll find this kind of fascinating. And this is the case from the existence of things, including time itself. And this is what is referred to as the cosmological proof, which comes, of course, from the Greek cosmos, which is universe, everything. And I learned recently that the actual etymology of cosmos is order. Order. So when we speak of the cosmos, we're speaking in the Greek mind of the everything that exists. Okay? So the cosmological proof is the proof that God exists because things exist. Okay? Now let's try and demonstrate that as best as we can. We're just going to put it in a very simple syllogism here. This argument has been advanced in favor of theism and particularly in favor of Christianity since the time of Thomas Aquinas and perhaps even before. It's very easy to understand. And it goes like this. You have a major premise, a classic syllogism, major premise, minor premise, conclusion. Your major premise is everything that begins to exist has a cause. Okay? That's a very easily defensible premise, by the way. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Why do we frame it that way? Well, as soon as you talk about something that begins to exist, you're talking about something that is finite. Okay? It's finite. If it formerly didn't exist and now it does exist, it means it's existed a finite amount of time and it cannot be infinitely large. Okay? Because whatever created it would have to be larger, therefore it cannot be infinite. So, take for example this remote control. Very easy to understand. Was there ever a time when this remote control did not exist? Sure. And now it does exist. And therefore we know, because it began to exist, there was a time that it didn't exist, it is not an eternal remote controller, but now it exists. We know for certain that somebody caused this thing to exist. We probably could just look on the packaging here, Interlink Electronics. We could call them and say, where did this remote control come from? We designed it, we built it, it's manufactured for us, we caused it to exist. Take the chair you're sitting on. There was a time, of course, when that chair did not exist. Now that chair does exist because a chair manufacturer made it. Take yourself. There was a time when you, frankly, did not exist, right? For me, that was 32 years ago. Okay, if you go back 33 years, I didn't exist. I was just a twinkle in my father's eye, right? Or a nightmare in my father's mind, whatever it may have been. But there was a time that I didn't exist, and now I do exist. Why? Because my parents caused me to exist. Okay? Very easy to understand. Everything, from this book, to this table, to this coat I'm wearing, to every single thing in the universe, if it is not infinite in either size or longevity, that is time, it must have began to exist. Okay? And if something begins to exist, then it must have had a cause, because things do not just spontaneously generate. You've never been driving down the freeway and suddenly, a refrigerator just is in the middle of the... that doesn't happen. If a refrigerator is in the middle of the freeway, it's because it fell out of the truck in front of you, not because it just spontaneously generated there. Something causes refrigerators to exist, and unfortunately sometimes they fall out of the back of cars. So that's our major premise. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Now, our minor premise is also not very difficult to demonstrate, and that is that the universe itself began to exist. Okay? The universe itself began to exist, and I wish I had time to go into all of the details here, but I will just give you two quick proofs for that. One is philosophical, one is scientific. Now, I'll start with the scientific proof. I do not necessarily subscribe to all of the elements and implications of the Big Bang Theory. But I can tell you this. The Big Bang Theory is near universally accepted in cosmological circles today. Notice I said near universally accepted. Okay, what does the Big Bang Theory tell us? Well, it tells us many things. But one of the main things it tells us is that there is a projected primordial starting place for the universe. That is to say, everything seems to be, it's like a balloon. If you took a balloon that was flat and you put a bunch of dots all over that balloon and then you blew it up, you would have the appearance that all of these little dots are growing out from that center point. Okay? Because of the cosmologists' ability to measure redshifts and other things, they can look at the universe and they can tell that the thing is expanding. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if something is expanding away from an epicenter, that it must have formerly been here, right? The laws of classical physics fit in very nicely here, okay? This is, you don't need to understand quantum theory. It's very easy to grasp. If there's an explosion and everything is moving out like this, then you say, what caused it? And thus you have the Big Bang. Well, what does the Big Bang tell us about the universe? Well, it probably tells us many things if it's true. And I believe that it is, in part it is true. And I don't have to go into all of that. But I will say this. One of the main things that it tells us is that the universe had a beginning. Okay, the universe had a beginning. And it is not infinite, by the way. There are many sources that I could give you that I just don't have with me this evening to demonstrate that basically since the advent of the Hubble telescope, we are able to determine that there is, in fact, a limit, a physical limit to the universe because things are expanding there. And you can actually talk about as the universe is expanding, you can ask the question, does what's over here exist yet? And the answer of science really is no, that it doesn't exist yet because time hasn't arrived there yet. I wish I had time to sort of explore that. But the point here is this. 40, 50 years ago, it was common for scientists to believe in what was called a static state theory of the universe. That is, that the universe is infinite and that it's static. That view is almost summarily and corporately rejected today by the scientific community. Most believe in a dynamic and finite universe. Okay? But if the universe is finite, it means it had a beginning. But what's our major premise? Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Now, for the atheistic cosmologists, and by the way, there are very, very few atheistic cosmologists. I would challenge you to find even one credible cosmologist who is a true self-styled atheist. There just aren't very many of them. But if you did find one, all that he or she could say is that the Big Bang started it. But this is hardly an answer, because, of course, the question begs to be asked, what started the Big Bang, for which there is no answer.